Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the book of Chronicles, the second book of Chronicles, that is Divrei Hayomim Bet. We are about to study chapter 17, that is Pasuk Yud Zion, and we have completed chapter 16 with the end of the reign of King Asa, a king who in a large sense, started to move the needle in the right direction spiritually, being faithful to God and destroying idols, but ended his life, unfortunately, with some tragic errors um, and letting his arrogance get a little bit in the way of his success. So, a mixed message on King Asa, but at least a significant improvement over his father Aviam and his father um, Rechavam. So now we continue to the next generation. We go, there was David, then Solomon, then Rechavam, then Aviyah, or Aviam, depending on how you read it, and then Asa. And now generation number 6 of the kings of Judah, we have King Yehoshaphat. Yehoshaphat will come to the throne at a time when the civil war between the two nations of Judah and Israel has evolved from a civil war into really just two warring nations, one against another. Yehoshaphat will, not in this chapter we read today, but later on, make efforts to bring the two kingdoms together. But by now, we have two separate kingdoms, each developing along its own path and each vying for superiority over the other one. We saw that develop in the beginning. We saw how the prophets discouraged fighting between the two, but eventually fighting broke out through the careers of Aviyah and the careers of Asa. We saw how this split solidified. So at this point, when Yehoshaphat comes to reign, that split is very unfortunately solid. Vayimloch Yehoshaphat beno tachtav, his son, meaning the son of Asa, Yehoshaphat, became king in his stead. Vayischazek al Yisrael, and he was a strong leader of Israel. So the simple meaning of this is that he was the referring to the people of Israel that were under the jurisdiction of the kingdom of Yehuda. Often the term Yisrael is sometimes used in contradistinction to the term of Yehuda, as Yisrael being the name of the northern kingdom and Judah being the name of the southern kingdom. Here it means that he strengthened himself over the people of Israel because the people of Yehuda still considered themselves the true continuation of the real legitimate leaders of what should be the leaders over the entire Israel. And he stationed soldiers, armies, battalions throughout all of the cities of Yehuda that were built up as fortresses. Yehuda, and he appointed officers, leaders over all of these cities, and Ephraim asher lochad oso aviv, and in the cities that were parts of the inheritance of the tribe of Ephraim. In other words, they were parts of Israelite territory, but they had been captured by King Asa, and we discussed this in previous chapters of the wars between the two, and that parts of the other tribes were incorporated into the lands of Judah. Both some of the lands that had belonged to the northern tribes were incorporated under the jurisdiction of the king of the southern kingdom. And furthermore, many of the people from within those tribes had migrated to the south. And this is something that continues and continued, so that the tribe of the Malchus Yehuda, the kingdom of Yehuda, wasn't only made up of members of the tribe of Yehuda. Thus, even to this day, there would be descendants of the other tribes together with all the Jewish people, is not just descendants of Yehuda. Vayehi Adonayim Yehoshaphat, and God was with Yehoshaphat. Why? Ki halach b'darchei David aviv harishonim, because he went in the ways of King David, his ancestor, the original ways of David, velo dorash la and he did not go to seek from advice and counsel, and did not search for spiritual contact with the Baalim. The Baalim is the Baal is the idol and the pagan, uh, the main pagan worship object of the Canaanites, which had, and as we know at this time, when the kingdom of Ahab is developing in the north, we know that the worship of Baal has now become deeply entrenched in the people of Israel and had made significant inroads into Judah as well. However, King Yehoshaphat was loyal to God, faithful to God, and therefore, in the theme that we've seen developing here in Divrei Hayamim, was that if the king remains faithful to God, then God helps him be strong and powerful and lead over the people. Kilelo, hey, aviv darash. He searched out. Remember, this term lidrosh, dorash, and I pointed this out before, means to seek God, right? And I've pointed this out before, and I'm going to emphasize it again. Dorash means to seek out how to behave, because uve mitzvosav halach, and he went in his ways, in his commandments. The chronicler understands this word lidrosh to mean seek God. How? By going in his ways, by doing the things that he tells us to do. This is very, very important, and that's why I'm emphasizing it. Below kima'aseh Yisrael, but not like the behavior, not like the actions. Remember, lidrosh, dorash. Again, I don't know how many times I'm going to say this. I'm saying this because it's very important, because people make this mistake so many times. The key thing here is lidrosh means to seek God by acting in the way that he wants you to act. Velo kima'aseh Yisrael, but not like the way the people of Israel are acting. So this Yisrael could be referring to the kingdom of Israel who is going, or it could be referring to the people of Israel in his kingdom who are not as perfect, but the king at least is trying to lead them in the right direction. And God established, this is this is chaf nun. The emphasis is to establish, to set up in a solid, reliable way. Vayitnu chol Yehuda, stable way. Vayitnu chol Yehuda min chol Yehoshaphat, and all of the people of Judah, they were happy with their king, and they brought offerings to their king. Mincha here is not an offering like one brings to a god, small g, or a god, large g, for that matter, but it's a mincha, an offering that the people bring to the king as gifts. And he had much wealth and honor, and this is how he ruled. So he was beloved by his people. A mincha connotes something which people bring voluntarily. Could you imagine a king becoming wealthy because of the wealth that the people bring him voluntarily? That must be a very beloved king. So Yehoshaphat is being presented in an extremely positive way. And his heart became great. However, not great in the sense of great, meaning haughty and arrogant, but no, bedarche Adonai, in the ways of God. Again, lidrosh, every time I say this, I'll say it again. Dirash is to go in the ways, to walk in the ways, to do the things which God wants you to do. V'od heisires habamos v'yaso asherim Yehuda. And in addition to walking and doing the proper mitzvot and doing the commandments as God had commanded him, he also took down and removed the high places that were dedicated to bamos. Is usually means the bamos that are brought, even those that are set for God, right? But they're all inappropriate, because the only place to bring sacrifices to God appropriately is in the temple itself. The Eta Asherim and the Asherim, which are a focus of idol worship, the sacred trees and so whatever it was. Yehuda, from the land of Yehuda, he removed those. So here we finally have a king who's removing the bamot, which is something which we haven't seen in a while. Now, in the next, this is important. One of the reasons why I emphasize what lidrosh means in Chronicles is remember the time period that it's being written in the beginning of the Second Temple period. This is also a similar. This is the time when the books of Ezra and Nehemiah and Nehemiah were written. I recommend, if you haven't studied them, go back and listen to the podcasts that we studied together on Let the Prophets Speak about Ezra and Nehemiah, and that being the origin, the time in which what eventually became Rabbinic Judaism and the Judaism of today was really set on its path, and the idea that what God wants from us is action, right? That lidrosh, the type of that what God is not asking for so much as faith itself, but faith that leads to action. Belief in God is nothing and it's meaningless if it's not backed up with action. And I'm going to emphasize this, and this is one of the things that the chronicler is emphasizing. It's not so much that it didn't exist, this idea, during the Book of Kings time and way back when these events happened, but this is the emphasis that's being placed at this book at this time. And we're going to see it now in the next couple of verses, something brand new, something which we haven't yet seen, which is almost reminiscent of like a Talmudic or a midrashic idea where it's which and you'll see what I mean in a second. And in the third year of his reign, Sholach l'Sarav, he sent his officers with the following names: Leven Chayil. Leven Chayil literally translates to the one who is a powerful warrior, Ula Ovadia, and to Ovadia. Now, Ula Zechariah, Ula Netanel, Ula Michayahu, Lilamed, to teach Bi'orei Yehuda, to teach throughout the cities of Yehuda. So sending messengers, and these names are names associated throughout Tanakh, throughout the Bible with other prophets. Now, is this Ovadia the same as the Ovadia that we are familiar with in the Northern Kingdom, who is the prophet under Ahab? It's kind of difficult to say that he was working in both kingdoms at the same time, and the timing doesn't necessarily work out. So Ovadia was or is it the same Ovadia that wrote the famous Book of Ovadia, which is one of the books we also studied together a while back, one of the 12 minor prophets. Minor, not in the sense that they weren't important, but minor in the sense that their books are smaller. And Zechariah is the name of a prophet that pops up here and there. It's obviously not the same as the Zechariah of the Second Temple period, several hundred years later, but who wrote the famous book of Zechariah. But we had this Zechariah also as a name of a prophet during the First Temple period. Again, timing doesn't exactly work out. Michayahu, we know, is a prophet who was active around this time, and he'll come up later in some that he could be the same Michael as later. But either way, these are all prophets and teachers of Torah, and he sent them to teach among the cities of Judah. So not only did he just go around telling everyone to get rid of their idols and be faithful to God, but he actually taught them how to live and the wisdom that God wanted them to know. And together with them, he sent the Levites. As we know from the Torah, the special job of the Levites was not just to service in the temple, but also to teach. And now we see it very clearly here that the Levites are given the task to teach Torah to the people, and it names the leaders, the teachers: Shemayahu, Unetanyahu, Uzivadyahu, Va'asael, Ushimiramot, Vihonatan, Va'adoniyahu, V'tobiyahu, V'tov Adoniyah, Halavim, V'imayim, Elishama, V'horam HaKohanim, and not only Levites, but also priests named Elishama and Yehoram. All these names are common Hebrew names that we see bouncing around a bunch. Yehoram, we'll see some kings named Yehoram later on, and so on and so forth. Vayilamdu v'Yehuda, and they taught in Yehuda. And what did they teach? V'imahem, with them when they went to teach, was Sefer Torat Adonai, was the scroll, the book of the teachings of God, what is nowadays known as the Torah. So they taught Torah throughout the land. Yehoshaphat is being presented now not just as a beloved leader, one that people brought gifts to, and a powerful leader who built up the armies, but also a leader who led a revolution of Torah study throughout the land. This is something new. This is something that sounds almost rabbinic as we read it, because this was the time of the beginning of that of Judaism becoming what eventually became known as Rabbinic Judaism. So, which is why they emphasize this aspect. Might sound a little bit anachronistic, but this is the chronicler teaching us what he, everyone, when we discuss history, we always pick out those aspects of history that that tell the narrative that we're trying to say. This is how historians always work. And this is how the historian, the chronicler, is working as well. He's choosing those aspects of Yehoshaphat's reign that teach the messages that he is trying to teach here. And they went around all the cities of Yehuda and they taught among the people, reading the Torah. And the fear of God, right? And pachad here is not the kind of fear that we usually say. It's not the awe of God that comes with proper worship. This is fear, like fear for the life. In other words, he was so strong that that all of the kingdoms of the other surrounding lands that surrounded Judah, they were afraid of the people of Judah. So there was no war against Yehoshaphat. They were afraid to attack. And the people are on the right track. They don't have enemies attack them. In Pelishtim, it may be. And not only this, but even the arch enemies, those that have been for so long enemies, they themselves not only made peace, but the Philistines, they would bring to Yehoshaphat mincha, gifts, v'kesef, and silver, masa, that was given as a that was brought as a special gift. Gam ha'arviim, even the Arabians, right? Meviim lotzon would bring to him gifts of sheep, elim and rams. Shivat alafim u'shvamayot. They brought him a total of 7,700. Utiashim and these are goats. Shivat alafim u'shvamayot, 7,700. There's some significance apparently to those sevens here. Vayihi Yehoshaphat holech v'gadel ad lamala, and Yehoshaphat, the king, grew great and until really high. In other words, he became really, really famous, really strong, really important. Vayiven b'Yehuda b'Iranios b'Arei Miskenos. Within Yehuda, he built towers and cities of that stored garrisons, that cities that stored munitions and weapons, etc., ready to defend the kingdom. And he did a lot of work. Malacha here refers to the kind of work like building and what we would call today infrastructure. He built a lot in the cities of Yehuda. Presumably that means not buildings and roads and water supplies and all the kinds of things that would be necessary for a successful and prosperous nation. And men of war, powerful soldiers that were stationed, at least centralized in Jerusalem. And then they're going to be listed out, so I'm going to run through this a bit quickly, these next few verses. But I don't skip anything, so here we go. Listing out the soldiers and their numbers and the tribes to which they were, and families to which they were associated. From the tribe of Judah, there was of heads of thousands. Adna Hasar. Adna was the main general. Ve'imo Giborei Chayil, and with him were many soldiers, powerful soldiers. Shloshmeos Elef, a total of 300,000. Ba'al Yado. And next to him, also from the tribe of Judah, was Yehochanan Hasar, was the general Yehochanan. The Imam Masayim Ushmonim Elef, and he had 280,000. Va'al Yado Amasya ben Zichri, and next to him was another general, was Amasya ben Zichri, Hamisnadev Ladonai, who is known as one who gave himself over, who gave gifts to God. Misnadev, he was dedicated to God, so he was especially known for his dedication to God. Ve'imo Masayim Elef Gibor Chayil, and under his command was 200,000 soldiers. So that's from the tribe of Judah. Umin Binyamin, from the tribe of Benjamin, Gibor Chayil El Yadah. There was strong warrior, a powerful warrior named Eliadav, Imo Noshke Keshes, and with him he had those who are armed. Neshek is generally weaponry, and noshke would mean the way the word is formed. Those that are armed with bows, umagain, and shields. Masayim Elef, 200,000 of those. Yado Yehozavad, and with him was a general named Yehozavad. V'imo Meo Shmonamelef Chalut Tzava, and under his command another 180,000 soldiers. So quite a significant. If you add up all these numbers, you have a significant number of soldiers ready to defend the kingdom. These were the people who served the king, which doesn't even count. Those were based mostly in Jerusalem, and this wasn't even counting those who were stationed in the garrison towns that were spread out throughout the land of Yehuda. So here we have a very beautiful description of a very successful, very beloved king, very powerful king, a king who's loyal to God, who's bringing about a spiritual reformation, getting rid of idols, getting rid of Bamot, and teaching Torah throughout the land. Everything sounds wonderful. And we will continue to read of the career of Yehoshaphat in the next chapter, 18. We will learn of Yehoshaphat's efforts, for better or worse. Unfortunately, it didn't work out too well, but we'll see that in chapter 18 to try to reunite or at least create an alliance between the northern and southern kingdoms. From this position of strength, he was able to try to reach out and make this happen. Did it work? Did it not work? Was it good? Was it bad? We'll make those judgments as we study and see what the chroniclers' views on this are as we study chapter 18. Thank you so much for studying chapter 17 together with me. Thank you so much for participating in this podcast. I deeply appreciate your company and comments. Have a wonderful day.